Yo, what's up, gamers? So, I walked into the break room today and Todd from HR has turned the microwave into a choice-based training simulator. The screen gives me two options. Option A, fix the aging engine to make fewer, deeper games. Option B, greenlight 3 more licensed projects and hope nobody notices. So I pick option A. The microwave beeps, ignores me, selects option B anyway, and flashes, Telltale will remember that. Except sometimes it didn't, and that is the problem. Telltale Games built its entire brand on choices that felt powerful. The Walking Dead made players feel like every dialogue option, every relationship, and every ugly decision could come back later. But as the studio grew, the choices started getting smaller, the projects got bigger, the engine got older, and the business kept choosing speed over depth. So now I'll welcome you back to the Janitor Files, a series where we mop up gaming's biggest disasters, weird industry experiments, studio collapses, and the messes the industry does not clean up. So before we get into this, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Did Telltale fail because the choices stopped mattering, or because the studio grew too fast? Now let's grab a mop, because Todd's microwave just ignored my dialogue option, so now we're gonna have to clean up the rise and fall of Telltale Games. Telltale did not come out of nowhere. The studio was founded in 2004 in San Rafael, California, by former LucasArts developers Kevin Bruner, Dan Connors, and Troy Melander. And that matters because LucasArts had deep adventure game roots like dialogue, characters, puzzles, story. That DNA was already in the building. Telltale's early years focused on episodic adventures like Bone and Sam and Max Save the World. They were experimenting with smaller releases, story-driven episodes, and character players could follow over time, at a point when most of the industry had moved on from classic adventure games. And for a while, Telltale felt like a scrappy story shop. Not the biggest studio, not the flashiest, but one that understood timing, dialogue, and character drama. Then 2012 happened. In 2012, Telltale released The Walking Dead Season 1. The Walking Dead was not built around huge action set pieces, complex combat, or a skill tree with 47 tiny boxes begging for attention. It was built around people like Lee, Clementine, with survival, trust, and fear, and the horrible feeling of making a decision when every option smells like wet carpet and regret. The game sold around 1 million copies in its first 20 days. And by 2013, it had reached millions of episode purchases and became one of the biggest success stories in narrative gaming. But the real reason The Walking Dead hit so hard was because players cared. Lee and Clementine became the emotional center of the whole thing. You're not just picking dialogue, you were trying to protect someone, trying to survive, trying to decide what kind of person Lee was going to be. And when the game told you, Telltale will remember that. It felt serious, like consequences were waiting somewhere down the hallway, holding a clipboard, and that was the magic. Telltale made choices feel personal, and after The Walking Dead, that feeling became the brand. The formula they were using worked because it made simple actions feel important. A dialogue choice was not just dialogue, it was a relationship test. A quick decision was not a timer, it was panic with buttons. And a moral choice was usually not, do you want the good option or the bad option? It was, which terrible thing can you live with after the credits roll? That was Telltale's strength. They knew how to make players second guess themselves. They knew how to make a small line of text feel like a threat. You did not always know what it meant. You did not know when it would come back. But you knew the game had seen you. The Walking Dead made it emotional, The Wolf Among Us made it stylish, Tales of the Borderlands showed the formula could be funny, fast, and surprisingly clever. At their best, Telltale Games made choice-based storytelling feel fresh again, but the more often you perform the same trick, the more people start watching your hands. Now, to be fair, Telltale's choices usually change something. Relationships could shift, dialogue could change, characters could treat you differently, scenes could land with a different emotional flavor. That stuff matters. But the issue was the big picture. In many cases, especially later seasons and games, the major story paths still bent back toward the same destination. It was not that choices did nothing, it was that they often did less than the promise they made them feel like they should. The Walking Dead Season 2 is a good example. Players could affect relationships, tone, and who was around for certain moments, but a lot of the larger stories still converged. You might take a different hallway, but the game was usually sending everybody to the same fire exit. Then there was Telltale's Game of Thrones. Some major events happened no matter what players chose. Ethan Forrester's death at the end of episode 1 is one of the clearest examples. You could say different things, try to steer the moment, but the outcome still came for you. And once players noticed that pattern, the magic got weaker. Early on, choosing who to save felt like it rewrote the story. Later, sometimes it felt like choosing which color the mop was. While the same spill kept happening, the questions started getting louder. Do these decisions change the story, or just the tone of the ride? And while players were starting to see the strings, Telltale was making the whole thing bigger. Much bigger. After The Walking Dead exploded, Telltale became the studio everybody wanted a story game from. And on paper that sounds great. More projects, bigger licenses, more attention, more chances to prove the formula could work anywhere. But that is where the problem started. Telltale took on a lot. The Wolf Among Us, Tales from the Borderlands, Game of Thrones, Minecraft Story Mode, Batman, Guardians of the Galaxy. That is a lot of brands for one studio to juggle. By mid-2010s, Telltale was no longer just making one focused narrative game at a time. They were running multiple projects, multiple episodes, and multiple licenses, while trying to keep the same basic formula moving forward. And the more that formula appeared, the easier it became to recognize the shape, dialogue wheel, time choices, relationship warning, episode cliffhanger, repeat. Not every game was bad. Some were excellent. The Wolf Among Us had style for days. Tales from the Borderlands had comedic timing that could steal your lunch and make you think it. But the formula that felt personal in The Walking Dead started feeling predictable the more it showed up. Telltale had gone from a scrappy story shop to trying to turn emotional choice games into a repeatable pipeline. And the bigger the pipeline got, the harder it became to hold together. One major issue was the tech. Telltale used its own in-house engine, the Telltale tool, and for years it had helped define their style. But as the games grew, the cracks became harder to ignore. Players dealt with bugs, stuttering, save issues, crashes, awkward animation, and dated visuals. The kind of problems that make an emotional scene feel like it is happening inside a haunted slideshow. And that mattered for more than presentation. Deeper choices require more scenes, more writing, more animation, more testing. When the engine struggled, bigger branching became more expensive and risky. At the same time, the company had grown fast. Staff members climbed, projects piled up, reports described crunch and heavy rewrites. Kevin Bruner became CEO in 2015. In 2017, Pete Hawley took over, and the studio laid off about 90 employees, roughly a quarter of the company, in a restructuring attempt. But by then, the warning lights were already flashing. The games felt too familiar, the engine was struggling, and the studio was trying to deliver on everything it had already promised. Then in 2018, the whole thing finally broke. On September 21st, 2018, Telltale announced a majority studio closure. Around 225 to 250 employees were laid off, roughly 90% of the studio. Only about 25 people stayed temporarily to finish remaining obligations, and the timing made it even more shocking because The Walking Dead, the final season, was still releasing. This was supposed to be the ending of the series that made Telltale famous. Instead, the studio collapsed while its most important story was still unfinished. Reports said that the company's last major investor pulled funding, and suddenly there was not enough runway left. Employees were laid off with no severance at the time, which later led to legal complaints and lawsuits. And for players, it was surreal. Telltale had spent years telling stories about consequences, and then suddenly became a real-world example of what happens when the business choices finally catch up. The company that built its name on choices ran out of good options, and for a moment, The Walking Dead, the final season, was left hanging. But the story did not stop there. After the shutdown, Skybound stepped in to help finish The Walking Dead, the final season. And that mattered, because it gave Clementine's story the ending players had been waiting for, instead of leaving the whole thing stranded mid-season. Then in 2019, LCG Entertainment acquired the Telltale name and the assets. The name came back, but it was a new company. The original studio and its old production structure was gone, and the people who built Telltale's best work scattered across the industry. Some joined other studios, some started new teams, some carried those lessons into new projects. So Telltale's collapse did not erase the style, it scattered the people who understood it. And years later, some of those people took what they learned and tried again somewhere new. And that is where Dispatch enters the story. Now Dispatch is not a Telltale game. It was developed by Ad Hoc Studio, a company founded in 2018 by former Telltale developers including Nick Herman, Michael Chong, Dennis Lennart, and Pierre Choret. Nick Herman worked on major Telltale games like Tales from the Borderlands and The Wolf Among Us. So when people call Dispatch part of Telltale's legacy, that is why. Not because Telltale made it, they did not. But because some of the people who helped build that style took what they learned and tried again somewhere new. Dispatch is episodic, story-driven, choice-driven, built around dialogue, character relationships, and decisions that shape the drama. It was that Telltale-style DNA, but with newer presentation, a tighter scope, and distance from the old pressure. Dispatch is not Telltale 2.0. It is what happens when some of the people who helped build Telltale's best work gets to try again, without the old production structure, without the aging engine, and without 5 licensed projects stacked on the table. Dispatch does not erase what happened to Telltale, it just proves that the hunger for stories where choices feel like they mattered was still there. The genre survived, but the old structure did not. So what does this actually mean? Telltale did not prove choice-based games were dead, because they were not. People still wanted story games, they still wanted hard decisions, they still wanted that feeling that one dialogue choice could come back later holding a baseball bat. The problem was how big the machine around that idea got. The Walking Dead worked because the choices felt personal, but when Telltale stretched that formula across too many projects, with aging tech and not enough time, the choices started feeling smaller, under too much pressure, and that is the real irony. Telltale Games kept asking players to make hard choices, but behind the scenes the company kept making the same ones. More projects, more licenses, more episodes, and not enough time to make all those choices feel bigger. This is why the collapse still sticks. Not because Telltale had no talent, they had plenty of it. And not because players stopped wanting story games. Dispatch proves that hunger was still there, the problem was the structures around the stories. Now we're back in the break room. Todd from HR is here staring at his choice-based microwave simulator. It gives him 2 final options. Option A, learn from the past. Option B, make 7 more projects before lunch. Todd picks A. The microwave pauses, thinks about it, and then selects B again. And I'm like, yeah, that machine definitely studied the Telltale playbook. Well, that's all I got. I gotta bounce before Todd starts selling this break room simulator in 5 episodes with 3 endings that lead to mandatory compliance paperwork. But before I go, do me a favor. Hit like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want more gaming disasters cleaned up from the break room, and comment down below. Did Telltale fail because the choices stopped mattering, or because the studio grew too fast? This is Scruffy the Janitor signing off. Peace out.